Hey, I would like to yap to you very nerdily about the newest Prime Warframe Voruna and why her fourth ability is good and criminally misunderstood. Hopefully you find it somewhat amusing. But first, much better. Voruna's fourth ability, Ulfrun's Descent, is considered her least useful ability, and despite that, a lot of people love it. Fans of Voruna have been begging DE to make Voruna run on all fours when entering Ulfrun's Descent, and finally after 3.5 years, they delivered this through her Prime Warframe. However, most people that play this Warframe don't even use it. They simply replace this ability with something else, which is Roar most of the time. So why does this ability get replaced so often, and is it actually good? Voruna's kit is all very synergistic with each other. Her first ability makes her invisible and grants her movement speed. When you attack, the invisibility breaks and grants you a huge stat boost to your melee weapons. Using abilities to attack doesn't break this invisibility, and instead you blink in and out of your invisibility the moment your abilities land. Editing Moogly here. While editing this video, Voruna got a pretty substantial buff. When attacking with your abilities while invisible, you no longer lose your invisibility at all. This is huge for two things. One, you can actually benefit from Arcane Crepuscular normally using the attack, which adds another 3x critical damage. Number 2, you can also utilize your passive status immunity fully, which makes Voruna quite immortal while using this build. This is a really appreciated buff from DE and will definitely make people look into her fourth ability more if this video on its own wasn't enough. Her second ability puts 5 random status effects on an enemy that will also spread to other enemies if the target is killed. Her third ability gives health orbs on melee kills and energy orbs on headshot kills, and the ability can be extended if Voruna kills enemies affected by 5 or more status effects, which is easily achievable by her second ability. Finally, her fourth ability is a main damage ability that makes her leap to a target and deal significant damage. You get 5 leaps to kill as many as you can, and landing a kill with your charge makes the next charge way stronger. Obviously, these abilities all have way more to them than meets the eye, including augments and a lot of maximization. But something becomes abundantly clear when you look at her kit. Her fourth ability is just a damage ability, and the rest of her kit is used to buff herself. Since guns on Warframe have become so powerful, why would you not just remove the damage ability for another buffing ability and just kill everyone with your weapons? Well, that's what people did exactly. It makes sense as Voruna's fourth ability has a lot of issues. The augment for it is mandatory to make it work well, which provides you one less mod slot. It's incredibly complicated on how the damage is actually dealt, and even then the damage doesn't feel great compared to weapons. And so, players come to the conclusion that the ability is just not worth investing into and simply replacing it should be the meta on her. But the purpose of this video isn't to highlight what's going on with Voruna's kit and what's her most popular build on her, but rather an analysis on how her fourth ability functions. So, let's get to the bottom of this and see what Ulfrun's Descent actually does. Ulfrun's Descent on the surface is a simple ability where Voruna charges forwards and deals damage. However, that damage has a billion different multipliers on the background that can all work together for its calculations. First of all, we have the base damage of 5000, but the ability also poses a critical chance of 20% and a critical multiplier of 1.5 times. These multipliers change depending on if the first ability, Shroud of Dinner, is active and also if Voruna scores a kill with the ability. Shroud of Dinner automatically puts Ulfrun's Descent at a fixed 100% critical chance, and increases her critical damage by a flat 2 times at base. The base damage of Ulfrun's Descent as well as the critical damage from Shroud of Dinner both scale with strength, giving her 2 different very meaningful strength scalings. Then, every kill scored by Ulfrun's Descent direct hit increases the damage, critical chance, and critical damage of the ability. This gets maxed out after scoring 5 kills with her abilities at 900% increased damage, 1.95x critical multiplier, and 42.5% critical chance. We will always consider the maxed out stats for the ability, as Ulfrun's Endurance basically guarantees that you will be on those stats as long as you keep scoring kills with the ability, which is fairly easy to do. But already, here is the first weird part of this ability. Each kill increases your damage by 200%, critical damage by 0.1, and critical chance by 5%. For some reason, these numbers don't exactly stack evenly, and the 5th kill of the ability only provides half the damage when reaching its cap, making the number 4.5 times higher as opposed to 5. Considering these numbers were before Ulfrun's endurance existed, and Voruna only had 5 lunges and their single target, the developers probably considered that this oversight would not really matter. In this case, it does, and I think if the devs would be willing to buff this ability, these stacks would be their best approach. Increasing their limit could heavily increase the potency of the ability since it provides 2 different multipliers that Voruna absolutely wants to have. However, these are not the only multipliers the ability has. Ulfrun's Descent will also deal double damage to any enemy affected by 1 or more status effects. Unlike the usual mods of Condition Overload or the equivalent galvanized mods for weapons, this bonus is only applied once. This means that even your pet adding 1 Pakshu proc onto the enemy leads to the same damage bonus as you spamming Fangs of Thrax onto the enemy before striking them. However, there are other reasons to use Fangs of Thrax onto enemies before striking them. First and foremost, the ability is really strong on its own, and will spread status effects on kills similar to Contagious Bone, so that alone is a big factor. However, when taking Archon shards into consideration, it becomes even more important. These shards add another layer of multiplication at the end when working with the ability. Finally, the enemy struck by Ulfrun's Descent is dealt a guaranteed slash proc as a DOT after the initial hit, ticking for 0.35 times the initial hit's damage per second for 6 seconds. Surrounding enemies are hit with a weaker 1000 at base slash damage per second, which sadly does not benefit from the multipliers added by killing people with direct hits, but everything else still applies. With all this in place, the final damage formula consists of 3 parts. The initial hit dealt to the target selected, the DOT dealt to the target selected, and finally the DOT dealt to surrounding targets. The initial hit is calculated as follows, giving an example of someone scoring 5 kills, hitting an enemy with a status effect, and also having 200% strength with 5 Tau shards working in the favor of the ability. We have base damage times ability strength, which is 5000 times 2, times base critical damage plus critical damage bonus on kills times number of direct kills. Since we have 5 direct kills and the critical damage of bonus on kill caps at 0.45 and the base critical damage of the ability is 1.5, we get 1.95 from this one. We can then add Shroud of Dianar's critical damage times ability strength, which is a simple 2x2. We can then simply multiply by 1 plus damage bonus on direct kills times number of kills. I know this seems like a lot of things, but this is simply just you scoring 5 kills, which translates to a simple 10. And then, after all this is calculated, we multiply it by the status damage bonus, which is 2, and then the Tau shard damage bonus, which if we add all 5 Tau shards is 1.75. So the final math is 10,000 times 5.95 times 10 times 2 times 1.75, which totals to 2,082,500 initial hit damage. Sadly, it gets more confusing than this. The Archon shards providing ability damage will either all be taken into account if it's the same damage type, or they will be added individually as separate multipliers if they are different damage types. This means that the Tau shards bonus separates to Tau shard damage bonus from electricity, Tau shard damage bonus from corrosive, and Tau shard damage bonus from radiation, and all these are multiplied together. So, if you run 2 shards for corrosive, 2 shards for electricity, and 1 shard for radiation, the multiplier instead of 1.75 will be 1.3 times 1.3 times 1.15, which, if added to the math equation from before, would give us a new initial hit damage of 2,312,765. Depending on the status effects here, we can either increase our critical damage multiplier by a flat 1 thanks to cold procs, or add another 3.25 times multiplier thanks to viral procs, or when we take teammates into account, we can also add the most commonly used subsume ability on top, which is Roar. With all this, a Roar providing 75% damage bonus to Voruna using the same Voruna build, and using the Madurai Focus School for an extra 30% damage boost, the math changes to 10,000 times 6.95 this time because of cold, times 10 times 2 times 1.3 times 1.3 times 1.15, which are the Archon swords, times 3.25, which is the viral, times 1.75, which is the Roar, times 1.3, which is the Madurai. and this totals to 19,973,956 damage. And by simply adding more strength to Voruna, this damage gets increased rapidly. At 400% strength, which by today's standards is easily achievable, we would get 20,000 times 10.95 times 10 times 2 times 1.3 times 1.3 times 1.15 times 3.25 times 1.75 times 1.3, which totals to 62,939,518 damage to the enemy on the direct hit alone. For the DOT after, we simply take the result of this number and do times 0.35 to find the damage over time, then multiply by 6 for the 6 seconds it lasts, and multiply it again by the roar amount, which results in a total of 231,302,728 damage. The total damage on a single enemy therefore becomes 294,242,246 damage, which, if you're curious, is easily enough to one-shot the Thrax at level cap. The damage to surrounding units loses the damage multiplier of the ability from successful kills and also has a base damage of 1000, but it deals its damage over 4 seconds. Realistically, with 400% strength, your ability duration will never be over 145%, but let's do 100% for the sake of being fair. We get 4000 times 10.5 times 2 times 1.3 times 1.3 times 1.15 times 3.25 times 1.75 times 1.3, which totals to 1,207,059 damage per second for 4 seconds, which, if you add all 4 seconds, will give you a damage of 4,828,236 damage. This damage is not a lot, but keep in mind that since this is an AoE without line of sight checks, and it can also be applied multiple times onto enemies, it will easily take care of less tanky units like non-Eximus on those higher levels. And sure, while this is a very good scenario for Voruna to be in, it's quite realistic. In fact, if you have a teammate with Its Subsumed, chances are their strength are way above 250%, which is what I used on this example. And with Arcane Impetus alone providing 78% strength to Voruna, Madurai being another 40% strength, and Voruna having infinite energy thanks to Lycat's Hunt, it makes 400% strength a very easy goal to hit. Matter of fact, on Fisher missions with buff Warframes like Jade, the strength amount can reach way over 1000% without much effort, which would make the numbers completely skyrocket, but that scenario is highly unrealistic. Point is that when looking into the ability itself, you can easily make it deal with any unit in the game, especially when trying to max it. Also, I know this was a lot of math and most of you probably didn't even understand what's going on behind, but don't let all this math scare you from playing her. The gameplay is as simple as pressing 2 on an enemy and following up with your 4 to one-shot them. She is quick, very safe, and extremely fun. The math deep dive here is to prove that she is simply good enough as is. Voruna's Ulfrun Descent is an ability that takes away the most overpowered thing we have in Warframe currently, our guns. In return, it provides a high mobility, high damage attack that is still capable of killing everything and feels very fun to use. Sure, building around it instead of subsuming it takes away a lot of Voruna's damage potential as a character, but with how low enemy health is currently, Ulfrun's Descent still does enough damage to one-shot everything. So, is it good? Yes. Should it be buffed? Maybe. Should it be turned into an Exalted? Absolutely not. Turning Voruna's 4 into an Exalted only limits the creativity you can do with her. Imagine you have all these mechanics surrounding the ability in her current state to make it competitive, and you ditch all that for the sake of adding melee influence. The ability would just become another melee weapon with influence or affliction, which takes away most of the fun from its potential damage and playstyle. Would it be stronger? Sure, but it's already strong enough to do damage. The ability can't be stronger without sacrificing the fun aspect of it. If you have a Voruna Prime and you have subsumed this ability by following a guide for her and using her second or a melee weapon as a main damage source, please do try Ulfrun's Descent. I will provide my build and shards here, and with your profound knowledge from this video, you should easily be able to dish out a lot of numbers from it and also have fun. Well, I guess that's it then. Gotta find other stuff to work on now. Oh, for fuck's sake!